Okay, so hold on, wait, I saw that thumbnail. You're trying to tell me that this random Jets quarterback from the 1960s, a guy who's known nowadays as being arguably the most overrated player ever, is the most important in NFL history? What kind of paint are you huffing there? Alright, yeah, I know. It's gonna take a lot of convincing that this guy right here is the most important player ever to where the NFL is today. But hopefully after watching this whole video, you'll understand exactly why that is. Alright, so first off, it's very important to know Joe Namath's backstory, and I'll make it quick. But back in the 1950s, a youthful Joe Namath was great at every sport. And after some college complications, including not considering Notre Dame for reasons, he decided to attend Alabama and play football there. And as a freshman, he became the starting quarterback of the Crimson Tide and was balling out of his mind. Literally, in his first 2 years at Alabama, NFL scouts barely existed back then, but the ones that did were petrified of what Joe Namath could potentially do to the NFL. This man, Joe Namath, had GMs and owners terrified that he, as one single person, could destroy the entire competitive integrity of the league. And to be honest, it looked like that until his final year at Alabama in 1964. On one fateful play, Joe Namath's football career path would be altered forever. Now, after being suspended the year before for getting a little, you know what, we'll get into it later, but in his senior year, in a random game during the season, Joe Namath fell to the turf without being hit and lied motionless on the gridiron. And unfortunately, this would be the very anticlimactic early end to Joe Namath's career as a dual-threat quarterback, but he would go on to finish that year for Alabama, playing through torn cartilage in his knee, and pain so bad that he said it felt like he had been shot with a gun. But of course, every single person involved with Joe Namath hid his injury from the public, so to everyone on the outside, it still looked like Joe Namath was going to be this can't-miss prospect that was going to break the rules of the NFL. So, with that out of the way, as he got ready to join either the AFL or the NFL, Joe Namath broke barriers as he was offered an unthinkable $427,000 contract from the AFL's New York Jets, the most amount of money ever thrown at a football player. And remember, this was still just some college kid who'd never even played a game in the NFL. So of course, this contract put a humongous bright red target on the back of Joe Namath, and every single player he would play against did everything they could to slice the man in half. And this fiery hatred towards Joe Namath, who had one leg, would only be stoked more because Joe Namath practically invented the glamorous lifestyle that is associated with being an NFL player today. Not even lying, Joe Namath was literally the pioneer of, I guess, the football playboy. By the time he had finished college, my man Joe Namath was walking into the NFL with an estimated body count of 300. So, what happens when you give a guy like Joe Namath, with the reputation that he had, the most money anyone's ever gotten at their sport, and put him in a city like New York in the 1960s? Well, you get the most influential off-the-field man of all time. Namath earned the nickname Broadway Joe, showing that, hey, I have money, I'm good looking, I think, so what would happen if I used my football skills to win off the field? And also, at the time, the AFL did everything they could to market Joe Namath as this incredible can't-miss talent off the field and on the field. However, that knee injury continued to plague his football career on the field. Don't worry, he was chilling off the field, but before even playing a game for the Jets, their team doctors looked at his knee once and immediately got surgery, changing the way he could move permanently. So going into his first season, as he jogged out of the tunnel, a lot of people I'm sure were expecting Shaquille O'Neal to come out, and although that didn't exactly happen, he still had respectable numbers in his rookie year and came home with the Rookie of the Year award. Now, after setting a new standard in how NFL players got paid, the actual lifestyle of the players, and how their names can be marketed, it was now time for Joe Namath to show what he can actually do as a football player. Now, I actually do still stand on the fact that if Joe Namath wasn't hurt, he actually could have been the best dual-threat quarterback the league had ever seen up to that point, because with the knee injury and the near-lethal amount of painkillers he was taking before every game, he was still one of the league's best pocket passers, as from 1966 to 1968, Joe Namath's prime, he had very interesting stats as compared with other quarterbacks from his era, as he holds up with 10,533 passing yards and 60 touchdowns. But yeah, this is a bit of an issue. He was a very solid quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he had a very wicked tendency to throw to the wrong jersey a little bit too often. So, with his interceptions being popularized during this time, Joe Namath also unintentionally made another revolution, starting the trend of a quarterback being described as grossly overrated. And remember, this was also the same quarterback that was supposed to be the greatest football player of all time, so he was getting scorched alive. Nobody thought that Joe Namath would ever win anything at this point, and he didn't even come within a solar system to what his expectations were when he joined the Jets. Now, at this point, Joe Namath could have actually just called it a career and already been one of the most important players ever, and I guess he almost did when the NFL forced him to sell his bar, but Joe Namath persevered and came back in 1968 to captain the most significant team in NFL history. Alright, so in 1968, Joe Namath ended up making his only All-Pro team of his entire career, but things were looking rocky early on, as although he was still slinging the old pigskin around, the Jets were struggling, as he had 2 games in a 3-week period where he had thrown 5 interceptions. But the Jets rallied, and somehow with Joe Namath's off-the-field stamina not even remotely slowing down, the Jets turned their season around and won 8 of their last 9 games, and because of a weird playoff system, the Jets would play the Raiders immediately in the AFL championship game. And it's very important to remember that this was a time before the AFL and the NFL, the 2 leagues of football, had merged. So the Jets first had to play in the AFL championship game, and then the Super Bowl where they would play the NFL champions. And in that Super Bowl, the Jets came in as just, you know, the biggest underdogs in Super Bowl history, going against the best team in the league by a mile, with the best defense, the best offense, the MVP of the league with quarterback Earl Morrall, with their backup quarterback being Johnny Unitas, all coached by the legendary Don Shula. So yeah, things weren't looking good for the stallion that was Joe Namath. But remember, if Joe Namath was one thing during the 1960s, it was a celebrity, and he just loved making headlines, and that's exactly what he did. So after getting some work in, Joe Namath held an open press conference where he was answering questions, and after a reporter decided to taunt him, Namath looked the man directly in the eyes and told him the Jets were going to win, I guarantee it. And just like that, Joe Namath uttered the most famous words in NFL history. Except in order to fulfill his impossible prophecy, Joe Namath had to take the Jets' soul hostage and hand it to the football gods, trading it in for one shiny gold trophy. Now, although going into Super Bowl III, the AFL and the NFL had already agreed to merge, the problem remained that there was still a stigma around, that the NFL was superior to the AFL, and with the Colts already being heavily favored going into the Super Bowl, it looked like they were just going to reinforce that idea. But Joe Namath had other plans. So, first, of course, after a little pre-Super Bowl prep ritual, Joe Namath was ready to leave it all out on the field. And the spirit of whatever demon he signed that contract with filled his body that day, because he played a perfect game. The stats may not say it, but he controlled the game incredibly well, getting it out of his hands, countering the blitzes thrown at him by the Colts, and threw the ball very efficiently. Now, on the other side, the Colts were absolutely struggling, with Earl Morrall playing so horribly that people thought he was throwing the game on purpose, with 3 interceptions, and even a late sad attempt by Johnny Unitas wasn't enough to overcome the overwhelming hormones and testosterone levels of Joe Namath. So after some more appropriate partying, Joe Namath had done it. He had revolutionized the amount of hype a college prospect can get, the contracts of all NFL players, the way the media follows players, the lifestyle of being an NFL player, public trash talking, and landing the final death blow in the AFL and NFL officially merging. So, in the modern NFL today, all I can say is, where would we be without Joe Namath? and I don't know, I guess there's a good chance some of you out there are related to this man. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you like this video, then watch this video right here where I rank the last 10 Super Bowls on a scale of S to F. It's pretty fun, trust me. Anyways, until next time.